Ontario political circles are still buzzing after yesterday's cabinet shuffle at Queen's Park, but part of that is because of continuing questions about the two firings which caused the shuffle. Premier Doug Ford announced that Andrew Kimber was resigning from the Premier's office and Jim Wilson was resigning from cabinet and being removed from the Conservative caucus. And while it was announced that Minister Wilson was seeking to leave help for addiction problems, Conservative sources in Toronto have suggested that both firings were linked to allegations of sexual misconduct. Premier Doug Ford's office is refusing to give any more details. Joining us now from Queen's Park is Robert Benzie. He's a Queen's Park correspondent for the Toronto Star. Mr. Benzie, thanks for taking the time.
Hey, Martin.
Listen, I guess the big question is, I mean, you're working the story, you're trying to find out what you're trying to find out. What can you tell us about, as of now, what reporters are being told, by whom, and what you still don't know?
Well, that's easy, Martin, because we're not being told very much. The government had this cabinet shuffle that was held behind closed doors on Monday morning, around 7:30 in the morning. No TV cameras, no journalists there, to announce 6 changes to the cabinet that were triggered by the departure of Jim Wilson, the most experienced member of Doug Ford's cabinet. He's a 28-year MPP. And was in Mike Harris's cabinet and in Ernie Eves' cabinet the last time the Progressive Conservatives were in power here at Queen's Park. So this is a big blow for Mr. Ford to lose Mr. Wilson's counsel at the cabinet table. Mr. Wilson resigned suddenly on Friday night after what we are told, sources tell us, a complaint from a PC staffer about his behavior. That the Premier's office took that complaint very seriously, and lo and behold, Friday night they announced that Mr. Wilson was seeking treatment for alcohol.
Well, this is one of the things that's intriguing from afar. What we're hearing, people like you, Queen's Park reporters, saying is that you're learning this allegations of sexual misconduct. You're learning this from Conservative insiders, but it's not coming from any official statement.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of unofficial statements from the Conservatives, and MPPs and cabinet ministers and staffers are talking, but the official line is still that there are these investigations. Thankfully, Lisa MacLeod, the Minister of Community and Children's Services and Women's Issues, spoke on Parliament Hill yesterday on an unrelated matter, and she confirmed for the first time publicly that there are these investigations are going on.
Okay, what do we know about those investigations? Are they independent external investigations? Are they investigations being conducted by the party, by the Premier's office, by the legislature?
Minister MacLeod said that these are third-party investigations. The Premier's office will not confirm what type of investigations, who's conducting them, what in fact they're investigating, because there's also a separate probe into allegations that have also not been substantiated made against Andrew Kimber, who was, until Friday night, Premier Ford's Executive Director of Issues Management, a very powerful figure here at Queen's Park and an important aide to the Premier. And I think that his departure has, a lot of people wondering what's happening.
A lot of people are saying that this is a very small community and this has had a lot of ripple effect as well at Queen's Park.
Yeah, I mean, Queen's Park is everyone knows everything pretty much, unfortunately, sometimes. And I think that a lot of people are wondering what's the real story. We're all trying to figure out what has happened, and the government is scrambling to get its message straight and figure out what it wants to say. Now, on Wednesday, Premier Doug Ford will publicly in Trenton, and that's the first time that we're going to be able to ask him questions about what's happened.
Yeah, I guess what are the unanswered questions? Who's doing the investigation? What's the nature of the investigation? We've had experience of it up here in Ottawa because we had all 3 federal parties at one point calling an independent outside investigator. We saw Jagmeet Singh did it, Andrew Scheer did it, and Prime Minister Trudeau did it. Is that what you're expecting from Premier Ford?
Yeah, I mean, remember, Mr. Ford is only the Premier because of a scandal that surrounded his predecessor, Patrick Brown, the former Progressive Conservative leader, who had to resign on January 25th, hours after CTV made allegations about him that he is now fighting CTV in court and suing them for $8 million. But he lost his job as leader of the Progressive Conservative Party due to allegations not dissimilar nature to what we're hearing about in these other cases. So yeah, I think there are a lot of people would like to speak to the Premier and find out what is exactly happening here, because there are so many questions swirling around, lots of rumors, lots of conjecture. Some of it is probably bogus, but we still don't know what's true and what isn't true.
Yeah. What would be the best path for a Premier faced with this kind of situation with a senior advisor and a former senior minister?
Well, obviously there are sensitivities involved, because if there are complainants, and we gather there are, their identities need to be protected. And their privacy. But you cannot also leave allegations swirling. It's not fair to Mr. Wilson or Mr. Kimber to leave allegations swirling out there that may or may not be true. So, the air needs to be cleared. And the NDP today was saying that the pressure is on Mr. Ford to speak publicly about what has happened and explain to Ontarians why he has lost his most senior cabinet minister in terms of experience and one of his 2 or 3 most senior aides in his office in the space of one day.
I guess one of the examples that comes to mind here in Ottawa was the case of Hunter Tutu, the former federal minister,
Yep.
where there was both the allegations of improper conduct and the allegation of alcohol or substance abuse. And the Prime Minister went to a certain point. He said, here's what I can tell you. It's this and it's this, and we're deciding how to deal with the whole thing.
And in Mr. Tutu's case, they wanted to protect the identities of the complainants in that instance. In this case, I assume that's what the thinking is, but the damage control has not been terrific, and in part that may be because Mr. Kimber was their damage control guy. He was the issues manager here for the government, and is by all counts good at his job. So I think that the loss of him in the office at this time, ironically, has exacerbated things, I think.
Well, listen, thank you very much for giving us the update, and we will watch this with great interest. Thanks for speaking with us.
Thanks, Martin.